Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Tin Man's Corner channel. I'm your host, Jeffrey Tin Man Taylor, and today I'll be reacting to my second Midnight Tales story video for you guys. And this one is 4 Scary True Abandoned Building Horror Stories. So without further ado, I'm going to turn the lights off, move the camera up here for you guys, and let's get this reaction on the road and in the bag. Okie dokie, here we go.
In my town, there used to be an abandoned prison. It has since been knocked down. It was in the middle of the woods, and it wasn't the kind of place you'd just stumble upon accidentally.
Oh yeah, that'd be creepy, just finding an abandoned place, period, in the woods. Because you never know if an animal could have got in there and made a big mess of fecal matter, or just a strange, crazy homeless person might be in there. But let's continue.
Every once in a while, police would patrol around it. But for the most part, they just let the barbed wire fences do their job. Now, this wasn't a high-security prison for serial killers or anything, but it held robbers, rapists, and the like until about 8 years prior to the incident. It was unsettling during the daytime, especially since so much of it had been left behind as if the place was abandoned in a hurry. But it was downright creepy at night. Back in high school, my friend Nick and I loved exploring. We went all over, including to the abandoned mental hospital that was only a couple of miles from the jail. We were lucky. Growing up in the area, we knew that there was a small hole under the fence in one spot, which was the only way to access the jail. One night, we made the usual trip under this hole, and were walking around the area outside the jail. We were moving as quietly as we could because, as I mentioned earlier, police would occasionally patrol the area. They just parked their cars on the opposite side of the fence from where we entered, so we wouldn't be able to see them if they were there. Eventually, we were pretty sure there were no police around, so we started being a little louder and turned on our flashlights. I should mention that other than the occasional policeman parked outside the fence, we had never seen another person anywhere near the jail, let alone inside the fenced area.
Before he continues on with this story, these guys are lucky to find abandoned properties just to explore. I wish we had stuff like that around here. Everything we had abandoned was either condemned or torn down to build something new. And also, if there's police officers or security patrolling a place like this, I'm looking for another area that they ain't patrolling and get in before they come around with their flashlights or something.
We were hesitant to enter the jail itself. First, because of how scary it was at night, and second, because it was a pain to get inside during the daytime, let alone at night. So, instead, we just walked around the outside for a while, scaring ourselves for fun. Eventually, we worked up the courage to go inside the jail, so we made the long trek to the other side, where we knew there was an entrance. We were walking along the side of the jail where the cells were, which had these huge windows. These windows were so that, when the jail was in use, you could see all the inmates from the outside and observe what they were doing. As we walked, out of nowhere, a light turned on from inside one of the cells we were just feet away from. We couldn't see much, just the beam of a flashlight, which first pointed upwards and then turned directly at us. At first, we froze in terror. As I said, we had never seen anyone in there before. Who would be sitting inside a cell, totally silent and in the dark, as two teenage boys walked by outside?
It's probably a homeless person and you disturb their resting area. Oh boy, I hope they get out of there quick before this person starts chasing them.
We couldn't imagine it was another thrill seeker like us. It wasn't the kind of place you'd sit alone in the dark. A homeless person? We didn't think so.
It might be.
He wouldn't likely have a flashlight. And besides, we assume the cops must check the inside during the day once in a while.
Now, why would a cop be inside of one of the rooms? I mean, like you said, just patrolling the inside every once in a while, but they won't just happen to be sitting right there in the room in the dark. If it was a homeless man and he said they did not have no flashlight, I mean, they can probably get one if they saved up enough money over at a store somewhere, or somebody gave them one. You never know. You never doubt a homeless person because you never know what they'll be carrying.
A police officer? That didn't make sense either. There was no reason for him to be sitting inside the building, waiting when he would have known we were there for some time. After a few seconds, we sprinted away as fast as we could. I didn't even turn around to see if we were followed or anything. We just found the hole under the fence and got out of there. To this day, we still wonder, who was sitting inside an abandoned jail cell in the dark, presumably watching two teenage boys walk around outside, waiting until they were only feet away to announce their presence by turning on a flashlight? I assume we'll never know the answer to that question, and I don't really want to.
Like I said, it could be a homeless person, but it might be a security guard, police officer. But that didn't make no sense either. Why would he be just sitting there waiting for two teenage boys just to walk around that corner in the Pacific area too? So it has to be a homeless person, or either that, it might be a potential murderer or a psycho that did not like to be disturbed. Glad the boys got out there when they did. Whew. All right, let's get on with the next story.
Before I start this story, I need to explain the job I worked at. It was a security job where I worked overnights, usually from 8 p.m. to 8 a.m. It was a large property I had to watch, which consisted of driving around in a company vehicle throughout the night, making sure there were no trespassers or anything out of the ordinary. Most nights, nothing unusual happened, and I spent my time listening to podcasts while driving around. One night, around 3 a.m., I was driving around and came to an abandoned parking lot. This parking lot was part of the property I had to monitor. It was located on a road in a small town, somewhat out of the way. The lot used to belong to an old business that had been torn down. The parking lot was surrounded by trees, and the entrances were partially blocked off by branches, so you had to drive through them to enter. As you can imagine, there were no streetlights in the parking lot or on the adjacent street. So, as usual, I took out my flashlight as I drove through the branch-covered entrance. I lowered my window and shone the flashlight around the parking lot, seeing nothing. But as I began to turn, I noticed something out of the corner of my eye, a shadowy figure waving its hands. I stopped the truck. The figure came closer, still waving. I pointed my flashlight directly at the figure and saw it was a man, probably in his late 20s, with a regular build and a scruffy beard. I cracked my passenger window open and asked, "What are you doing?" The man told me he needed help and started walking towards my side of the truck. I shone my flashlight at him again, and he kept saying he needed help as he continued to approach. I yelled at him to stop. He was about 5 feet from my truck, and I didn't want him any closer for my own safety. I asked him what he needed help with. As best as I can remember, in a low, soft voice, he said, "Hey man, I was wondering if you could help me out. I lost something over here and was wondering if you could help me find it."
No, don't do it. It's probably a trap to lure you out of the vehicle. He might end up stealing your vehicle if you get out of the truck, or try to knock you out and rob you. You never know.
I asked what he had lost. He said it was his phone. But to be honest, based on his appearance, he kind of looked like an addict. Someone who might not even own a phone. I told him maybe I could help, but then things started to get strange. He asked, "Is it okay if I use your phone?" Obviously, I wasn't about to give my phone to a stranger I'd just met at 3 a.m., so I told him I'd call his phone for him instead. I asked him for the number, but he paused for a moment and then said, No, it's okay. All you have to do is get out of your car, and I'll use your phone. Just follow me. It's around this bush." I looked at him, confused. He kept insisting, Just follow me behind this bush. Now, I've watched enough shows and movies to know that this situation was raising a lot of red flags. I was working alone, at night, in the middle of nowhere, in a secluded, abandoned, dark parking lot. I wasn't going to see another person until 7 a.m. The last thing I wanted to do was give my phone to some sketchy guy and follow him behind a bush. I got nervous and told him in a loud voice, "No, if you don't leave, I'm calling the fucking cops." The man visibly flustered and said, "No, no, no, it's all right," before backing away slowly into the darkness. I left that parking lot faster than I ever had before, and didn't return for another hour or so. When I came back, I was relieved not to find him. I still don't know if he was telling the truth or had some weird intentions, but I'm glad I trusted my instincts that night.
Yeah, I'm glad you did too, because that guy probably, like I said, lure you up of your vehicle, go to that bush, and maybe knock you out or drug you up or something just to take your vehicle and phone and disappear. Whew. That could have ended a lot worse for him, I tell you, if he did not trust his instincts.
From my early 20s to my mid to late 30s, I was a Garda officer in Ireland, Garda being what we call the police here. I served a small community on the west coast, isolated from any other town. There were no trains, no nearby airport, no taxis, no Uber, and only one bus a day. This was probably the only reason they had their own Garda station. Most other small hamlets rely on the Garda from the nearest town, but due to this town's extreme isolation, they needed their own station. The hamlet covered a wide area of farmland, with many empty and derelict properties. When Ireland became more industrialized, most people from these rural communities moved to the cities in search of better paying jobs. The hamlet had a very eerie feeling to it, even though the residents were some of the most down-to-earth people on the planet. Our Garda station consisted of 3 dispatchers, though most calls were routed to another center. We had about 7 officers, most from out of town. We all knew each other well, and when we did get a call from the area, even if it wasn't important, most of us would respond, just to have something to do during our long shifts with little activity. One night, we received a call from a landline phone originating from a derelict property on the edge of the hamlet, isolated from the other plots of land. I was asked to respond alone, as every officer in the area was attending a fatal 3-car and 2-lorry crash on a nearby motorway.
Oh,
I walked outside into the cold wind, got into my car, and drove down to the property. No lights, no sirens. The call had been a hang-up, lasting no longer than 13 seconds, according to dispatch. As I pulled up to the dark, beaten-down property, I felt a shiver run down my spine. The old wooden farmhouse gave off a feeling I can't quite describe.
always sad to hear about a multiple car pileup too. I mean, that's just awful. But also, I know what he's probably going to say. It does give off a eerie vibe if a farmhouse is sketchy as like this.
It didn't feel welcoming. I got out of my car, walked to the front gate, which was moldy and wet, and slowly approached the tall front door. I knocked heavily and called out, "Hello? This is Officer from the Garda. Would you let me in?" There was no response. After waiting about 20 seconds, I knocked again and said, "Hello, I'm afraid if you don't answer, I may have to make a forced entry. Please come to the door. This is the Garda." Again, there was no response. I almost wished there was, just so I'd feel less lonely and vulnerable. I radioed dispatch, informing them that I might need to make forced entry as no one was answering the door. They advised me to keep an eye on the property and said they could have another officer from the nearest town over in about 25 minutes. I sighed and thanked them. I walked back toward my car, but before I could reach the gate, I looked back at the house and saw an old, ill-looking man with an unshaven face staring at me from an attic window. I froze in shock pulled out my flashlight, and shone it at the window. The man quickly ducked down. I shouted, "Sir, you need to come down and open the door. I need to talk to you. More Garda officers are on the way. Come downstairs." I was starting to feel unsettled by the whole situation. I informed dispatch about the man, and they replied that they would notify the incoming Garda car and advise them to use their sirens to get there faster. Dispatch sounded uneasy, to say the least. I stood by the front gate, scanning the windows, expecting to see that face again. I couldn't get the image of that disturbed man out of my mind. After about 20 minutes of knocking and hearing nothing in return, the Garda car finally arrived. I briefed the two officers about the situation, and we approached the front door. One of the officers, a tall and intimidating man, shouted in a deep voice, "Sir, get to this door before we have to open it ourselves. If you don't, we'll knock the door down, and you'll be detained. You'll stand with your hands up on the other side of the room when we enter. We'll cuff you, and you'll be taken to the station. If you have a problem with that, you can discuss it in our Garda car." His tone was so commanding, it almost felt like he was addressing me. We went back to the car, and the officer retrieved what we call the Big Red Key, a large metal tool we use to break down doors safely.
Oh, I know what you're talking about. It's something that the SWAT team would use as well over here to break down doors for forced entry. But yeah, if an officer like that was telling you to open the door now, you better do it, because there ain't no "I didn't hear you" nonsense about it. If they saw you that you're in there, they want you to come to the door immediately.
The officers took the key to the door, counted 1, 2, 3, and smashed it against the door 4 times before it fell with a heavy thud. The house was now open. We drew our flashlights in one hand and tasers in the other. As we stepped inside, I could hear shards of glass crunching under our feet. One of the officers shouted, "Sir, Garda officers have entered the property. Show yourself with your hands in the air. We are armed with tasers, and we are authorized to use them." We slowly moved forward, shining our flashlights into every corner of the apparently empty living room. Seeing no sign of the man downstairs, we directed our lights up the crooked staircase. But before we could move, a man suddenly jumped from the upper floor onto the stairs. He looked insane, with large red eyes staring right into my soul. I shouted, "Sir, place your hands above your head slowly." But before I could finish, the man charged down the stairs, screaming. One of the officers yelled, "Taser! Taser! Taser!" The man let out a gut-wrenching scream of pain as he collapsed to the floor. We rushed towards him, handcuffs at the ready. As we restrained him, he kept mumbling about a big man who gave him food every day. We put him in the back of my car, while the other officers followed behind as we headed back to the station. During the ride, I read him his rights, but he kept asking me to tell his ex-wife to get out of the car because she was being rude. I told him it was just the two of us, but he wouldn't stop going on about it. When we arrived at the station, we asked him for his name, but all he said was, "The man you all want to know." Eventually, we had to record his information as simply unknown. The next day, we were informed that the man would be picked up by the Irish Intelligence Service. Once my colleagues managed to get his name, it turned out he was wanted for stalking a minor, child abuse, 3 charges, and possession of child pornography.
Oh, he's a crazy pedophile. Well, I'm glad they were able to get him then.
Knowing what this creepy man had been involved in made the whole situation feel much worse. As the service came to collect him, the man told every officer in the station, "I'll find a way to get to you and do what God has told me to do."
Not only that, but he needs to go to a mental place too, because the way he's talking don't sound normal. And he's probably on hallucinogenic drugs or something. You never know.
After my first semester of university, at the beginning of May, I decided to reward myself by getting tickets for a band I wanted to see. Unfortunately, they weren't playing in my hometown, and the nearest venue was in a small town 6 hours away by train. I had a friend attending university in that town who agreed to let me stay with her. so I figured I'd be fine to go. I had never been to this town before, but having lived in larger cities my entire life, I often associated small town with safety. I declined my friend's offer to drive me to the concert, considering she was studying for finals, and I enjoy a good walk. The town was divided by a river, and to cross it, you had to go over one bridge, walk through a park on an island, and then cross a second bridge to get back into town. To reach the first bridge from my friend's university, you had to walk down a nature trail. It was a lovely walk at sunset, especially since I had just emerged from my first winter in a harsher climate than I was used to. The nature trail and park were filled with joggers, children playing, and squirrels, all of which I had missed. I felt completely at ease with the route, though I was somewhat distracted and didn't pay much attention to exactly which path I had taken. The concert didn't end until shortly after midnight. I crossed the first bridge and made my way across the island to the second bridge. It was a nice night, and I was actually enjoying the warm spring air. That is, until I came to a hill I didn't remember walking over on my way there. I stopped at the base, feeling like something was off, but I eventually chalked it up to forgetting about the hill. How funny, I thought, as I walked up the unfamiliar hill. But my amusement disappeared when I reached the top and found myself looking down into an empty carnival, with the second bridge beyond it. For context, I'm a 5'7", 120-pound female, trained as an aerialist in circus performing for most of my life. This means that any extra weight I carry is all muscle, which boosts my confidence, and I've never had a fear of carnivals or clowns. But walking over an unfamiliar hill to suddenly see a carnival I didn't remember definitely set me on edge. Still, there didn't seem to be a way around it. Forest flanked either side, and the bridge I needed was right there. Plus, the carnival appeared abandoned. So, I started down the hill, keeping a brisk pace and staying on high alert, with my focus fixed on the bridge.
Hey, it may look abandoned, but you never know. There might be some creepos in there. Potentially scare people who ever come on that bridge. She needs to be careful and stay alert, like she said.
I was most of the way through when I saw people. They were far enough away that I didn't jump, but I did stop dead in my tracks. They looked fairly normal from a distance, judging by their clothes, and I was too far away to make out their faces. They were sitting on whatever was available: lemonade stands, immobile roller coasters, covered picnic tables. I didn't know what to do, and I'm sure there were better options. But in that moment, feeling like I had to act, I started walking again. As I did, I made eye contact with one of them and held it as I passed through the group. The man I chose to look at had a gaunt, drawn face with sunken eyes that followed me, though the rest of his body stayed still. He looked like a vision of death. From what I could tell, the others were doing the same. I was terrified, and for some reason, maintaining eye contact with this zombie-like man was the only thing I felt was keeping me safe. I didn't break eye contact with him until I reached the second bridge, even walking backward to keep him in my sight. I turned and sprinted across the bridge, and as I did, I heard someone shout behind me, which only made me run faster. Now, the path from the university to the bridge was a nature trail, and it had no lights, leaving it pitch black. Trees blocked out the moonlight, making it impossible to see anything. I didn't care. I ran blindly down the trail, tripping over who knows what, anything to put distance between me and the carnival people. Eventually, I reached a patch of light at the edge of the university and stopped. There was no sound except for the crickets and my own frantic breathing. If anyone had followed me, they'd given up quickly. I managed to collect myself and remembered I had a cell phone, so I called my friend to meet me at a well-lit spot on campus, surrounded by studying students. I told her what had happened, and her eyes went wide. It turned out that there were two trails through the park on the island, a north and a south one. I had taken the north trail on my way to the concert, but accidentally took the south one on my way back. She explained that people never, ever pass through the carnival at night, as it's where the local meth addicts hang out. They were unpredictable at best, and at their worst, well, muggings were the least of it. I had gotten off extremely lucky. So while everything ended up being explainable, that somehow made it worse. I didn't sleep well that night, and when my friend offered to drive me to the train station across the river the next evening, I gladly accepted.
I figured it had to be some sort of a meth addict group because why would they look all like sunken eyed and everything? But I'm glad she got out of there quickly. So that's going to be it for now. Don't forget to like, subscribe, turn on post notifications for more Midnight Tales content like this. This has been another successful installment of the Tin Man's Corner channel. I'm your host, Jeffrey Tin Man Taylor. I say that's a wrap, and have a nice day.